Welcome, everyone, to the Reed and Christine Halliday Executive Lecture Series here at the Woodbury School of Business at Utah Valley University. Our speaker today is Patricia Richards. Patricia Richards retired in 2009 as Senior Vice President and Senior Regional Manager for the Wealth Management Group of Wells Fargo. Following a management training position with First National Bank of Chicago, Pat began working for First Security Bank of Utah. At First Security, she served in various management capacities, headed up trust and private banking, and later as president of Business Financial Services for the six-state region. Following the merger with Wells Fargo, she became National Director of Endowment and Foundation Markets. Ms. Richards holds a BA in Economics from Northwestern University and did graduate work in Business Administration at Northwestern University and the University of Utah. She completed National Graduate Trust School and has attended Pacific Coast Banking School. She's a certified trust and financial advisor and holds various security licenses. Ms. Richards is currently chair of the Board of Trustees of Utah Symphony and Opera, vice chair of the League of American Orchestras, and a trustee of Westminster College. She is a past chair of the Salt Lake Area Chamber of Commerce. Other current and past affiliations include National Advisory Board for the David Eccles School of Business at the University of Utah, Chair of the Board of the United Way of the Greater Salt Lake Area, President of the Salt Lake Rotary Foundation, and a board member of the Utah Bankers Association and President of the Trust Division of the UBA. Awards include the Utah Bankers Hall of Fame, Distinguished Banker of 2007, Utah Bankers Association, People of Vision Award for Friends of Sight, Excellence in Leadership, Utah Valley State College, the Athena Award, the Salt Lake Area Chamber of Commerce, and named one of Utah's 50 most powerful women in business. In real life, Pat enjoys skiing, hiking, sailing, and music, and she told me a moment ago has a cat. So please join me in welcoming Patricia Richards.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today, but I have to say it's a little intimidating to think of the challenge of trying to make my career relevant to you and hopefully give you some learnings that will be useful to you. And I'm also mindful that over the last couple of years, banking has not necessarily gotten good press in the country, and the reputation, I think, of bankers has suffered quite dramatically. And I hope that one of the things I can do today is maybe shed a little light on that and make it hopefully not seem quite so bad to you if you were considering a career in finance or banking to begin with. First of all, from my standpoint as to how I got into banking, I think it was predetermined. I'm a fourth-generation banker going back to my great-grandfather, and when my sister and I were very little, we used to play in the vault after hours when they were counting the cash. That takes you way back. And also using the family's Monopoly game money to create what we called the last national bank, where all of the kids that were playing cowboy and Indian had to cash their paychecks before they bought lemonade at our lemonade stand. So I think there was some comfort level as I graduated from college in economics and was looking for a career. Banking just seemed like a good place. I was familiar with it, but also as the kind of the center of the economy, the oil that makes the engine run. It was, I thought, a good place to see the overall economy and see if there were other industries that I might be interested in. So I started in Chicago at the First National Bank of Chicago then, which had a wonderful program. They had two management training programs, one for those who were already coming out with an MBA, and then a new one that they had started that they thought might actually be superior. And what they were looking for was undergraduates with non-business educations, liberal arts educations of some kind. And what they promised to do was put us through an MBA program, going to night school in Chicago, and give us a rotation through various areas of the bank during the day so that we could get a broad overview of banking, close contact with many of the senior executives, and then after that period, which would have been a 2.5-year program, to select what area of banking we wanted to go into and be prepared not only academically, but with the background knowledge of what the bank was all about. It was really quite a prestigious program, and many others around the country tried to emulate that later. It was a great program, and I learned a tremendous amount. One of the things I have to admit is that we enjoyed the daytime more than the nighttime part of the studies because it was a lot of work. And many of you probably are in that same situation where you're working, you're putting yourselves through school, going to school at the same time, and I appreciate how much effort that takes. About 2 years into the program, for various reasons, I decided that I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do banking or if that was just because that's what my family did. I wasn't really convinced that I wanted to get an MBA. I just wasn't certain of where I wanted to go. And I came out to Utah to visit a college friend who was in graduate school out here, and just to spend a week just kind of relaxing and goofing around. And when I saw the mountains here, I just absolutely fell in love with it. Decided I had to move west. If you are familiar with Illinois, you know, there's nothing higher than 600 feet in the whole state. So it was just exciting to me, the thought of mountains, and I decided to move west and got as far as Utah, spent a little time trying to figure out again what I might want to do, and finally decided that banking probably was a good, clean, legitimate career, and maybe I would try to do that. So I started interviewing for jobs in Utah in banks. Now, this was 1973, and I have to tell you that there was only one bank in the state of Utah who would hire a woman as an officer of that bank. Every other bank that I interviewed, and I interviewed with 7 banks here, wanted to know if I could type. And that was their idea of what women were designed to do within the business world. So I went to work for First Security Bank because they had the vision to see that my background fit some of their needs, and I became a trust officer. Now, in trust officers, it's not real banking in many ways. It's not taking deposits, it's not making loans, but it is working with families in managing their wealth, helping them with taxes, working with some of the most, I think, intimate financial affairs that people can be involved in. And what I found was that it was like doing, learning absolutely everything you could ever want to know for your own personal needs, but being able to do it, get paid to do it, and do it for someone else. I decided the MBA was a useful thing. I went back to school at night. And what I found from the academic side of my career was, the accounting classes, the finance classes, they were just essential. But as I look back, the things that I have actually relied on and used most and were most useful to me in my career were business writing, that communications aspect of things, business law, and a sales and marketing class that I took at the University of Utah that was really a sales class where they videotaped you when you were trying to do selling behavior, meeting objections, and I honestly learned more from that class than almost anything else that I've ever taken. And what I realized from that is you don't have to go into marketing to need to know how to sell. You need to be able to sell your ideas. You need to be able to convince your clients of your advice. Everything that you do in business in some way involves selling or marketing, either yourself, your ideas, or your organization. And so that turned out to be a very, very useful background for me. I stayed as a trust officer for about 7 years, and then I realized that my job progression in that role, I was on the personal trust side handling individual accounts, was blocked by the guy who was my age and had been there longer and was clearly going to be the manager of that department, and I didn't have anywhere to go. So I had to figure out if I wanted to become a manager, if I wanted to create advancement opportunities for myself, where was I going to do that? I had to figure out a move of some kind. And at that point, the managership of the employee benefits department, which is pension and at that time profit sharing, 401k plans, both for governments and corporations, that position became available, but I didn't know anything about it. It was a totally different area. The laws were different. The accounting systems were different. The clients were different. It was corporate and institutional clients rather than individuals, and looked very, very intimidating to me. So I was debating at that point, what would be the best thing to do? Should I stay in this safe area that I know, because I know what I'm doing and I know I'm doing it well, and that's very comfortable to me, or should I take this, what I consider to be a huge risk, and ask to be named the manager of the employee benefit department, about which I knew virtually nothing. Based on wise counsel of a friend of mine who happened at the time to be on the faculty in the College of Business at the University of Utah, I decided to take the chance and ask for that job, got the job, and I'll tell you the first big learning I got out of that was you have to take a risk to get ahead. It is a scary proposition, but you will not be able to fulfill your own destiny or capacities unless you're willing to take a risk. And again, and I've read this, so I think my experience is probably validated by what I've read, but I think in general in our society, men are encouraged to take risk. It's all about the way that they play, the way that they're in team sports. And in the past, women weren't necessarily so encouraged to take risk, and it was harder for them and less acceptable. But what I have found is it's well worth it. You always should consider taking the risk and reaching beyond what you feel comfortable that you can grab onto, because basically you'll be surprised at how fast you can learn and how fast you can catch up to people who've had the background. The way the economy and business and technology is changing today, it changes so fast that every couple of years, everybody's back in the same place anyway and has to relearn everything, so you're not really taking that much of a risk. One of the things that happened to me at that time, which I have looked back on and said was a really critical part of my learning, was going on the board of the United Way of the Salt Lake area. And I want to recommend to each of you that one of the most important things you can do for your careers is volunteer. Is make sure you have to get involved in the community. It will benefit you far more than it benefits the organization to which you're giving your time. But if you can get involved in depth in an organization, and particularly if you can get involved on the governance side, is go on the board, learn what it takes to run an organization, learn what it means legally to be responsible as a fiduciary to the community for the functioning of that nonprofit. You get opportunities that are far more advanced than you will probably get within your business, within your career, and it will jumpstart your abilities. So as chairman of the United Way, I got first the opportunity to create a strategic plan for the organization, something you should all know how to do. Strategic planning is hugely important. There are lots of different ways to do it. If you're in different organizations, you'll find they have a format that you'll have to probably fit within, but you need to learn how to run and manage a strategic planning process. It's so important to everything you'll do in business. Secondly, I had the opportunity to conduct a nationwide search for a new CEO. I would have never been able to do that at the bank. It was a huge learning experience, and it gave me the opportunity to really think through, what does it take to be a CEO? What does it take to run an organization? And then to bring that back into my personal growth as to what I was trying to learn for myself. And then as board chair, just setting agendas, leading meetings, dealing with a high-powered board of business leaders in their own right and trying to get them on the same page. One of the most important learnings, I think, from volunteer organizations is you can't manage volunteers the way you think you can manage employees. You don't have the rewards to give them. They have no salaries. You can't exactly fire them, although I have fired board members. But you have to learn how to create a vision and create a willingness to work on the part of those volunteers where they get some psychic rewards from you. If you take that back into the business world, what I learned from that really is we're all volunteers. Your employees are volunteers. They may have to work, but they don't have to work for you. They don't have to work for your company. And you have to create in them the desire to work for you and to do it as treating them as volunteers, treating them as people, and looking for what specifically they want out of that job and trying to make sure that they achieve that end in addition to the kind of institutional rewards that you have to give them. So over this time, my career in the bank was progressing, and I became the number two, in the whole trust and private banking area, which actually I liked. I found out I was a really good number two. I'm a really good vice president. What I learned from that opportunity was, you know, when you are a number two, or when you're looking ahead at the position that you want to have and the person that's in it, it's really tempting to try and get that position by demeaning them or belittling their abilities and promoting yourself. But you're far better off making them look good. Make your boss look as good as possible so that they get another job and you take theirs. And it's really a great way to advance. What it does, in addition to, it makes you the logical successor. Everybody sees that how integral you are in the success of that business line, but it creates for you a powerful ally somewhere else in the organization, either above you, who can pull you along, or lateral to you, that will be your ally when you need allies. And believe me, you will need allies. So that was I think a great lesson from being the second in charge. Stephen Covey puts it, I think, very well. It's important to believe in abundance, not in scarcity. There's plenty to go around. Don't think you have to just hold on to something for yourself. If you give away things, like give away thanks, give away praise, give away credit for things, it always works better for you. I can't attribute the quote because I don't know who said this, but somebody said, "It's amazing what you can get done if you don't care who gets the credit." And that's a very true saying. So I became then the overall head of the trust and private banking area once I found my boss a better job. And I just loved it. It was absolutely, to me, the best job I ever had. I got to work with wonderful people. I got to work with challenging problems. I grew the department. That position enabled me to go on the bank board of directors, which was an incredible opportunity to see everything that was going on in the bank, and learn about all kinds of product lines that I would never had any kind of contact with otherwise. So it was really exhilarating. And I think one of the most exciting parts of that was that I got an opportunity to lead a mutual fund development project where we took investment funds that we had managed in other ways within the bank and within our brokerage entity and converted them into mutual funds. It was this was at the leading edge of when banks were doing this. It was really quite controversial. Our bank counsel didn't want us to do it. They thought from a security standpoint it was very scary to them. Didn't know if we would get sued, didn't know what was going to happen. But I became convinced as I served on the task force that did this that it was really in our clients' best interest that the whole structure and regulatory oversight around mutual funds was so much stronger than around the bank investments that we were doing, that would really be a benefit to our clients, and that we really ought to do it for our clients' benefit. So I ended up taking that point of view, which then was accepted by the bank. They agreed to convert those funds, and I became sort of the unofficial leader of that project, which gave me some experience in project management, which is a whole different stuff than just day-to-day management. I mean, it was setting timetables, going through an incredible workflow chart of what we had to do legally, structurally, accounting-wise. It was just, it was an amazing process. It was the most difficult thing I had ever done to that point. Later, it seems easy compared to some of the things I've had to do subsequently. But at that time, it was a really terrific experience. And so I would recommend that if you have the opportunity to step out of your day-to-day assignment, not to leave it, but to add on a project, a big project, one that has corporate visibility, and if you learn to do that well, it was probably the signal moment that changed my career path from being within one product line to all of a sudden being suitable for the bank to look at to run any product line in the bank. And it created visibility, and it gave me great skills in project management. It even got me the cover of American Banker, which is kind of a big deal for bankers. You wouldn't care. One of the things that I really learned from that too, because it involved making sure that our clients understood the value to them and felt comfortable with this conversion, was that one of the most important roles of leadership is communication, over communication. Say things 5 times more often than you think you need to. People won't even get it the first 3 times. The next 2, they might start to get it, and it's only after that that they really understand what you're talking about. So if you're trying to lead change, which is really, I think, what leadership is all about, is change management, leading change, you have to communicate, and you have to communicate constantly, frequently, and you have to figure out the words that are going to resonate with your audience. That was just a great learning experience. So I'm doing this for about, not the conversion, but this whole leading this part of the organization for about 5 years, and I'm enjoying it immensely. It's just what I want to do. I'm happy as a clam. I think I've got it all. This is where I want to be. And First Security Bank decides to reorganize. And I mean totally reorganize, not just move some pieces around, but major, major transformational change. And out of that became my first crisis management experience. And unfortunately, it wasn't just a 1 week long crisis. It was a 6-month long crisis, and it was very difficult to deal with. In order to do this transformational change that they felt they needed to do to survive, they hired in some consultants. They pulled 2/3 of the top management of the bank completely out of their day-to-day jobs, and put them on these conversion teams, where they were exploring different corporate organization forms and looking at not only how should we be organized, but who should be involved. That left 1/3 of the managers of the corporation to run the entire corporation, and we were 6 states at that time. In Utah, what that meant was that the president of the bank and I were the 2 people running the entire bank in Utah. And we sat down together. Everybody else was on assignment. We sat down together. We divided up the product lines. He took some of them. I took some of them. Things that I had never had any contact with before, like international banking, corporate treasury management. There were just a ton of things that I had never been involved in before, and all of a sudden I was running them. We split up. We alternated if there were speeches to be made in the community, who was going to make them. We alternated chairing our community boards around the state. It was the most amazing management training experience I have ever had. And I don't know how many times a person would really have the opportunity to do that, to play president for 6 months. It was a great learning experience. One of the things I learned from that is at the very senior levels, executive levels of leadership require an immense amount of energy. You have to be in shape to do it. I found that I had to actually work out every morning just to build my strength to make it through these days, because it was a tremendous challenge and stressful, because you were reaching beyond your comfort level to do things you weren't familiar with and taking on a role that was above where you maybe felt comfortable with. So energy and just physically developing yourself for the strength to run an organization is really important. You just can't, I don't think you can do it without it. The other thing that I learned at that time was the immense value of courage. There was a point in the engagement with these consultants at which the people who worked for me regularly came to my office and in tears, literally in tears, and said, these guys are just messing with us. They are, we think we've found an organization form that we think works. They're manipulating our data. They're forcing us into this other conclusion that isn't ours, and they're making it look like it's ours. We feel manipulated. It's terrible. They're yelling at us. I mean, it was really awful. They were treating them very, very poorly. I had to think about this because these guys had my life in their hands. I mean, they were reorganizing the bank, and their recommendations as to who should take over what were going to be vital in who got what jobs, or any jobs coming out of it, because we all knew there was going to be a downsizing involved. But I just couldn't stand seeing my people treated the way they were describing to me. And so I went to the management committee and I said, these guys are being unacceptable. They're behaving in an unacceptable way. I will not stand for the way they're treating my employees. And then I gulped, because it took a lot of courage to do that. And the next thing that happened was the consultants called and apologized, and came and apologized to my whole staff and backed off and let them do the work that they were supposed to be able to do. That gained me such tremendous loyalty from my staff, and not only from the people that were involved, but from others who just heard about it. Sometimes it takes that courage to stand up for your people. It absolutely wins you loyalty that you couldn't buy any other way. So long story short, we reorganized. They completely changed the structure of the bank. Instead of having, we still had individual bank charters in each state, but we operated the bank as if it were a virtual entity where product lines were run over the entire 6-state structure. And I ended up being assigned to a structure that had 2 product lines that I was familiar with, but 3 that I had, again, no knowledge of at all. And I've got to check my time to make sure that I'm getting through the career here on time. But what I found that the first thing I had to do, because it brought together people who had never worked together before, who didn't have any common bonds, the only common bond that we found was customers. We were all on the commercial side of the bank. And the idea was to have a focus on a common customer so that you could cross-sell these other lines of business that heretofore maybe hadn't been exposed to the clients. So my first job I found was to create a vision, to try to tell people why we were organized the way we were, what it meant to them, how their job fit into it, what the vision of the future was, and even what I ended up creating a mythology around why we were who we were, and building events at which people got to know one another so that they could feel comfortable working together. I have decided that of the duties of leaders, creating a vision is probably the most important. I think you cannot be a good leader unless you can create and articulate and engage people in a vision of a future that makes them want to work for that future. And that's the primary role of leaders, to create that vision and then enlist others in that vision. So I thought I'd just gone through the 2 most trying events I could ever go through, the reorganization experience, this creation of the mutual funds, and lo and behold, I had no idea, because I was on vacation in Puerto Rico one day and got a phone call from the bank, which was ominous to start with, and was told, we are going to merge with Zions Bank. When you get back, we're going to be doing due diligence, and you're on the committee to review this area of the bank. Just a shocking, just a shocking thought. So for the next, I'm going to say for the next 6 months or 9 months, we worked as teams from each of those banks on trying to determine what the combined bank organization was going to be. It was absolutely amazing. I mean, the politics were incredible. What you ended up doing is trying to figure out who's the guy on the other side of the table from Zions Bank, and they were trying to figure out who's the person from First Security Bank, and can I work with them, and who's going to get this job, because we both have the same job, only one of us is going to have it. How do we do this? It was a really amazing experience. And then just as it came to the point where the shareholders were supposed to vote on this merger, as you probably don't recall, it's been over 10 years now, but the Zions shareholders voted this down. And all of a sudden, after their computer was in our computer room, and I was already managing some Zions employees in Nevada and Utah, we weren't going to merge. And 2 days later, we were going to merge with Wells Fargo. And it was just unbelievable. We had all started out thinking that we were running like a 440 race, and all of a sudden it turned into a marathon. Because we weren't at the end of the job, we were at the beginning of the next job, and it was even bigger. Because we were a $23 billion bank, but they were a $230 billion bank, and the complexities were absolutely incredible. Again, at some point in your career, you're going to be involved in a merger. It just is going to happen. And it is a very trying time. The best you can do, I think, is to keep a very positive attitude, try to keep your employees together, try to create a situation in which you help them change. Because if they can't change, what I saw through that is the people who couldn't accept this lost their jobs. They had to be flexible. They had to be able to say, I can do this, I can see how it's valuable, and I can create a career in this new organization. And if they couldn't have that level of positiveness, they were eliminated from the scene. So that positive attitude and helping bring your employees along into the future is a huge advantage to you as managers and leaders. As I look back, there were 3 times in my career where my job was completely eliminated, and I had to take on an entirely new role, and that probably didn't even exist before, and not only take on new product lines, but actually have to define the job because the job didn't exist before, and create the job as well as the business unit. You have to be comfortable with ambiguity. You're not going to get a template. Management, the top leadership in these instances basically just said, that's your job, you figure it out, and didn't give you a whole much guidance. You had to kind of look at what are the overall objectives? How can I fit into that? How can I make my business unit fit into that and provide value to the organization? And you'll have to figure it out yourself. There will be no one that gives you a cheat sheet as to how it is to be done. So you do need to be flexible, and you really do need to have a fair sense of comfort with very ambiguous situations. I did live through the merger with Wells Fargo. I ended up, because my job, what I was doing was really a corporate level job that involved 6 different product lines. At Wells Fargo, it's so big that all of those product lines were run in different areas of the bank, and so my job didn't exist, and I had to find one. That was one of the times when I had to find a job, and I was just lucky, I'm truly lucky to have one. And the reason I was able to have a job is because I had networked with some of my colleagues around the country. It happened that one of them worked for Wells Fargo, and the first thing that he did when he learned that they were buying First Security was call me up and say, I don't care what happens, you have a job with me. And that's how I got a job. Otherwise, I probably would have been outplaced because my job didn't exist anywhere. And I had to take a step back. I took a job that I'd done before that I'd really outgrown and truly wasn't all that interested in, but it was a job. And it gave me the opportunity to see the new organization from the inside and to look for opportunities to find where I wanted to go, which I eventually did 2 years later, and gave me the opportunity to take over the wealth management area, which was the culmination of my job. At the time, it was the lowest, least productive office in the second tier, as they manage them by, or rank them by size of Wells Fargo in the wealth management area. And over the next 5 years, we took that to the #1 office in the top tier of Wells Fargo. And I truly believe that we were able to do that by putting the employees first and putting the clients first and letting the numbers take care of themselves. I've always felt that if you try to manage to the profit, to the bottom line, you're going to make the wrong decisions. If you try to do what's right for clients and what's right for employees, the bottom line will reflect that, and you will achieve financial goals. But just managing financial goals doesn't address the real issues in an organization, which are the people issues and the service issues. I think that's pretty much my time. Let me see if I have a final word here. I don't think, the world that you're going to face is moving much more rapidly than it did probably throughout my career. The opportunities are going to be different for you, but I truly believe that if you prepare yourself as a learner, so that you always, throughout your career, take advantages for learning, take advantages to take, even if you have to take a lateral transfer rather than a promotion, to learn another area. I believe that you will have to have that level of flexibility, that level of breadth, and you'll have to have creativity to change with the rapid advances that you're going to see during your careers. If you prepare yourself in that way, I think you'll succeed no matter what happens. Thank you. Okay, he's telling me questions. Sir.
When you were talking earlier about volunteering and working for Security Bank, were you also in the MBA program at that time, or were you done by that?
No, I was done by that. Well, I actually never finished it. And so this is just because University of Utah would not accept my credits from Northwestern, and I just couldn't take them all over again. So I have enough credits, but not enough with any one institution. But no, I don't think you can do everything. You've got to focus on what's most important. I would get the skill sets first, but when you can build it into the balance of your life, I would spend as much time as I could out in the community. It'll just be the best benefit to you, you can imagine. Other questions? I explained everything to you. Yes, sir.
Still working for Wells Fargo, or are you doing something else?
I am doing something else. I'm very grateful. I was able to retire in 2009, which was still pretty much a scary time in terms of what the stock market was doing, what the economy was doing, but I was close enough to it that I felt like we had reached the bottom, we were going to go up, I could do it, and I knew Wells Fargo was going to survive. I mean, there was a time in which no one knew if any of the banks were going to survive. It was the scariest thing you've ever seen. But I knew Wells Fargo was going to survive, and I was chairing the Symphony Opera Board, and I honestly didn't know if they were going to survive, because the arts were under the most stress in our lifetimes from this recession. So I retired to basically be board chair full-time for the Symphony and Opera, and that's what I'm doing now. And I love it. It's the most rewarding thing I have ever done. Well, thank you so much. One more? Yeah.
For someone who's just starting a career in banking, in your opinion, what would you say, which branch of banking has the most potential to grow?
What you've seen over the last 10 years is that investment banking has really been the engine of growth. It got hammered, as you know. I mean, who went out of business? Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers. The investment banks are the ones that went out of business because they were tremendously undercapitalized. But that was where the growth was, that was where the money was, that's where there were just tremendous opportunities. I would say now that that has started to come back. That's still a very attractive area. I think anything that you can do to be an advisor to individuals on their finances is in huge demand. If people learned anything out of this last several years, it ought to be that they shouldn't be with amateurs, that they really need professional guidance. But really, just solid banking. I talked to our commercial loan officer manager a month ago, and he said they had the best fourth quarter they have ever had, ever, in terms of commercial loan initiations. So I think banking, I think finance is still the core of our economy, and it's a growth area still, in spite of the setbacks that we just saw. You should do something you like to do. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.